The vice president urges people to wear masks as the coronavirus pandemic accelerates across the South. Plus, what's behind the spike in gun violence in New York City and other big cities? Here's what you need to know. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need2Know podcast for Monday, June 29th. I'm Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Carlo, good morning.
Jill, good morning. I hope you had a good weekend, everybody. We have swapped places here. You're in the city and I'm in Long Island.
I know. I'm listening. I can hear the birds chirping behind you. And
let me
for
know
anyone watching, it's very picturesque.
Yeah, I'm on this little screened-in porch back here. But yeah, hopefully the birds aren't too annoying. Otherwise, I'll have to change my little setup here.
No. I like it. It's nice background music. All right, let's get to the news. A grim milestone over the weekend. The number of cases of coronavirus around the world has now passed 10 million, with 500,000 confirmed deaths. More than a quarter of those deaths have been in the United States, as the officials continue to struggle to contain a growing outbreak across the South and the West. Vice President Pence, he urged people to cover their faces in public, but he did this around the time that he visited a Dallas megachurch where more than 100 worshipers packed into pews without masks. He himself wore a mask in public for the first time, which I believe makes him the highest profile government official to do so. Meanwhile, the HHS secretary went on the Sunday shows yesterday to say that the, quote, window is closing on the U.S. to get the pandemic under control. The church, by the way, it was like even the people in the choir were pretty close together, and they weren't wearing masks either. And that seems like a recipe for disaster.
Look, the one thing that we know for sure, Jill, is that these, whether it's church or a bar or a restaurant, these indoor gatherings where you're, yelling or talking or eating and your mouth is open, like that's the worst possible place to be. But, it's amazing that we're at this point where the White House is pretty much just going around holding these events that will very likely lead to infections, right? Whether it's this church, whether it's that rally. And they're not really offering anything of substance. 128,000 dead Americans, and our president won't even commit to endorsing the one thing that we know helps slow the spread, which is masks. He left it to the vice president to do that, and even that was like a little bit, he didn't straight out say like you need to wear a mask, but he said, I urge every Texan to wear a mask to stop the spread. So again, that counts as progress in this state. But look, the government is utterly broken. People have noticed, you're watching a federal government basically fail to do its most basic job in real time. I mean, this is a remarkable moment that's going to be taught in public policy classes. It's going to be taught in high school history for years to come.
Look, it is pretty much an American story. I know it's a point we've made on this podcast before. We have 25% of the world's cases. And we are 4% of the world's population, if that. And we are one of the only countries, short of Brazil and maybe Russia, that hasn't figured out how to get this under control. Or we figured it out, we're just not doing it. So it's
really upsetting.
And I did interview, I interviewed someone from the head of the Medical Society of New York on Friday on Cheddar, and she was saying, in terms of PPE, she's like, we still have a problem. She's like, if there is a second wave of this, we're still having trouble getting, basic protective gear, because in part, just for numerous reasons. But New York, again, like I'm concerned about New York too, by the way. Yeah, we've totally crushed the curve, but things are opening back up. I actually went out to dinner Saturday night.
What?
I know.
No way.
I did.
In a restaurant?
Outside.
Oh, wow. How was it?
It was really nice, actually.
Oh, I bet.
Well, listen, we sat, so to kind of set the table, pun intended, we sat outside. Long Island, by the way, is on phase 3, so you're actually allowed to eat inside, but that is just a bridge too far, as Dr. Fauci would say. We were not ready to do that. We sat outside and we kind of said, my husband and I were like, we're going to go. If we don't feel comfortable, like we're going to check it out. If we get there and we feel like it's not, the tables aren't far enough or like we don't feel safe, we're going to, we'll leave. And the tables were super far apart. All the wait staff were wearing masks. There was hand sanitizer everywhere. And we were just like, this isn't that different than ordering in, in terms of the risk.
No, I think
there's
that's
no,
a safe
like
risk.
if we were going to do delivery, you're still having someone prepare your meal and touch the stuff. And
Right.
that was the thinking.
I got to say, not eating restaurant food out of a paper bag sounds amazing.
We did it. We were like we were really conflicted about it. I hope, knock on wood, I hope it's okay. Like it was nice also I felt like we were supporting a local business. I felt good about that, and I was happy just to see people at work. But yeah, I mean, I hope that there's not a spike in New York in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks as
That's going to be the key to see. Yeah.
Okay, another huge piece of news that broke late on Friday. The New York Times published this bombshell report citing unnamed intelligence sources that Russian intelligence officers offered cash bounties to Taliban fighters for killing U.S. troops in Afghanistan. Again, Russian intelligence officers were paying cash to Taliban fighters to kill U.S. troops. President Trump, was reportedly briefed on the issue in March, but did not take any action. He has denied that he was ever briefed about it or knew about it. U.S. Special Ops forces are said to have alerted their superiors about the plot as early as January, and that's because they had discovered a stockpile of American cash in a Taliban outpost, and interrogations of militants led them to believe the Russians were behind it. Moscow has denied the accusations, but
this
incredible.
This is an incredible story, and I would urge everybody to read it. I'll link to it in the newsletter today. This story was written by 3 very good New York Times reporters that I personally trust, and I don't doubt it. But you do have to, we've gotten in trouble in the past with relying on unnamed stories that are based on unnamed intelligence sources. So keep that in the back of your mind. There's always a risk when people don't put their names on things. That said, Jill, to my knowledge, and someone correct me if I'm wrong, but not a single Republican congressperson came out this weekend to say that this is a problem. I hate to. It's so it's such a boring thing to say at this point. But imagine if this happened under President Obama, the United States president, knowing that Russia was putting bounties on our troops' heads and we didn't do anything about it. I mean, I'm not saying we need to go nuke Moscow or something, but that would make Benghazi look like child's play, right?
And I mean, I know we talk about this a lot, but in any other news cycle, this would be, I mean, the biggest story to hit.
Yes.
Liz Cheney did tweet about it. She wrote on Twitter, if reporting about Russian bounties on U.S. forces is true, the White House must explain, 1, why weren't the president or vice president briefed? Was the info in the PDB? Who knew what and when? And what has been done in response to protect our forces and hold Putin accountable? Some other Republicans in Congress actually have retweeted that.
All right, so I guess okay. That's better than nothing. I'll take it.
According to the Times, so at least 1 American troop was killed in Afghanistan in this type of attack by the Taliban, paid for, or at least with money given to the Taliban by Russia. I don't personally know what's worse. I read the New York Times report actually twice because this is just to me, just horrific. So I don't know what's worse, that the president was briefed on this and didn't do anything, or maybe he just didn't process it, right? So that is one part of the story, or that intelligence officials or his staff didn't brief him on it for whatever reason. Maybe they think that he wouldn't want to hear this type of information. Maybe he doesn't read the reports.
Right.
I don't know. To me,
it's bad. Yeah, it's bad no matter what.
Yes, for the president to just say, I wasn't briefed on it, that's a problem too. That to me doesn't exonerate him or his administration.
No, of course not. I mean, you would think that this would be the kind of thing that would reach the president. I would hope, at least. And granted, they've had a lot on their plates these last few months, but one would hope that this sort of thing would get in the briefing. So the two questions I have, I actually didn't see what you said, which is that the New York Times is now reporting that at least one American soldier has died in what they believe to be one of these Russian sponsored hits. So that's obviously horrific if true. The other question is, how high up did it go in Russia, right? This was the GRU, which is Russia's version of the CIA. And we know that they were responsible for trying to influence the 2016 election. So the question is, was this just some like rogue officers in the GRU that were doing this, or was this a directive from Moscow, from Putin? Remember, Russia is essentially a failed state, right? This massive failed state at this point. Putin's entire foreign policy is pretty much, what can we do that helps destabilize the West and makes America look bad? So this would jive with that, because they would be trying to blow up the peace deal that the U.S. finally, and credit to President Trump, finally made with the Taliban, and keep the Americans bogged down in Afghanistan. So it's certainly not hard to believe that, the highest levels of power in Russia were behind this. But I suspect that we'll find out more.
In other news, New York City is experiencing its most violent June in nearly 25 years as shootings have soared over the last several weeks. At least 18 people in the city were shot in less than 24 hours over the weekend. The NYPD says a total of 70 people were shot in the last week. That is compared to 26 people the same time last year. The mayor is denying that the spate of violence is a result of the police pulling back enforcement after the protest backlash.
If this is in fact, well, first of all, I think there's a lot of, I think this is one of those things where there's a lot of different factors at play, right? First of all, gun violence spikes in American cities in the summer. It just does. There's more kids out. There's more, kids causing trouble. There's more people just with hanging out outside. I think that's going to be especially true this year, since people in New York have been cooped up for so long. But if the suggestion is that the police are pulling back enforcement because because of all the backlash they've received, or like to make a point, doesn't that suggest that they're bad at their job of policing? I mean, if they're not patrolling certain neighborhoods or looking the other way to make a point. One of the things that I've never understood, Jill, and maybe this is a stupid point, but I never understood why police departments, especially urban police departments, have not been at the forefront of the gun control debate in this country. Like, why is it always the poor, moms and dads whose kids were murdered in school who are out there like testifying to Congress and, giving press conferences on the steps of the Capitol? Why is it never police? Like, you'd think that the police would be the ones who are like, we have got to get all of these guns off the street. Like, they're a danger to their lives.
No, you make a really good point. The fact that there's been no, the fact that after Sandy Hook at the very, the thing, and then think about how many names we have since then. I mean, but Sandy Hook, those were kids. I mean, if there's nothing that pulls at the heartstrings of Americans and would make us to rethink policy, or in lawmakers who are Americans to rethink policy, you would have to think it would be somebody gunning down a group of first graders in an elementary school. The fact that how many years are we, and there has been really no concrete steps on the federal level to, at the very least, tamp back assault rifles and assault weapons is just such a failure of this country. And I have nothing to say. I mean, it boggles the mind.
No, I know, and it almost feels like we're talking like about two different stories, because these shootings that happen in New York, you're talking about, this isn't like these almost certainly weren't assault rifles. New York has a really pretty substantial assault rifle ban, but they were almost certainly handguns, and they were almost certainly it was almost certainly black on black crime in dangerous neighborhoods. That's just a fact. That doesn't make it better, of course, or anything. It's just it's another side of the coin of the the gun violence epidemic that this country deals with.
I mean, I think that it's, to your book. I went on a tangent just about it, and I actually I don't want to get into a debate on guns, and the assault weapons is something that I've never fully understood. You could you could very strongly feel that the Second Amendment, we have a right to bear arms, and not that does not mean we have a right to have assault weapons.
Of course. Yeah, I
anyway,
couldn't agree more.
But yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to say because I don't know what's behind this huge uptick. But you know, when you think about what's happening to cities right now in terms of people fleeing cities, nothing like, you know, anyone who may have been on the fence hears about gun violence and violence going back up, and it's like, okay, that seals the deal, kind of, I think, for deciding to leave.
That's absolutely a big issue, and we're gonna, you know, we'll see whether stuff like this starts to have an actual impact on, you know, population. Or it's also like, I mean, I hate to use the term broken windows because that's kind of like this very loaded term in policing, but you know, violence begets violence, right? So once it's, you know, once these shootings, once it starts to feel like a neighborhood is out of control, it sort of spirals from there.
Some updates in this country's continued reckoning over race and the symbols that many say perpetuate racism. Lawmakers in Mississippi voted to replace the state's flag. It was the only one left that features an overt Confederate battle emblem. The state's Republican governor has said that he will sign the bill, and a new flag will be voted on in November. Again, Mississippi changing its flag. That is really big news.
It is. I wouldn't have guessed that they do that, to be honest. But separately, is kind of separate, but also, you know, on the same topic, Princeton University removing Woodrow Wilson's name from its public policy school, and as well as a residential college. This coming after students at Princeton and alumni demanded the name change because Woodrow Wilson, who was the 28th president, because of his quote racist thinking. This one's a tad more complicated. You know, Woodrow Wilson is a sort of complicated historical figure, but he was, of course, known for being pretty racist.
Starbucks is the latest major advertiser to join the Facebook ad boycott. This is following a steady stream of major companies deciding to pause their social media spending. Unilever, Pepsi, and Coca-Cola, three of the biggest advertisers in the world, also joined the hashtag Stop Hate for Profit campaign over the weekend.
You know, I thought that when we talked about this last week, I was kind of like poo-pooing it, and now I'm a little less poo-poo.
You're just poo?
I just poo. But, you know, Mark Zuckerberg personally lost $7 billion since this boycott started. That's according to Bloomberg yesterday. Facebook shares are down something like 3% this morning on this. You know, this is one of those things, right? Like, no company wants to be the first one to pull the trigger on something like this. And then once one of them does, in this case it was Verizon, then all the other ones are, you know, it's like corporations are like the kings of just like giving into peer pressure, right? So, well, if Unilever does it, then Pepsi's got to do it. If Pepsi does it, then Coke has to do it. So they have a major problem now where it's just sort of spiraling. Levi's and Diageo, which is the big liquor brand, they just halted advertising as of this morning. And, you know, remember, advertising is in a complete contraction to begin with, even without any of this stuff, just because of the pandemic. So this actually will have a material impact on Facebook's business now. It'll be interesting to see how much so.
So there have been calls, I don't know if you followed this, for these companies that have pulled their advertising money, at least for the month of July, from Facebook, to take that money and actually advertise with news organizations, which have
really? I didn't see that. That's
dramatically, you know, which, as we know, have seen their advertising budgets just go way down in terms of, I mean, just ad money has really dried up.
Well, because it's gone to Facebook. And
exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was already a bad situation, magnified by coronavirus and the pandemic.
Right.
And
I didn't see that. That's a good idea.
There has been, I mean, across the board, mass layoffs at TV stations, newspapers. Some newspapers are closing. It is a real problem for especially many areas of this country where there are no local news outlets anymore.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
That's the stuff that makes a difference in people's lives, by the way. You know, we talk about the presidential election and Senate and whatever. It's like, no, your local politician affects your life and your day-to-day being so much more than this national stuff. And if you don't have, if there's no local paper with a person who's going and sitting at a board meeting and just digging up something or you know, that's a huge loss to society. So
No,
I
absolutely.
hope that some of these companies actually, heed the call and put some money back into local
Totally.
news.
I'm totally into that. I love it.
And finally, on the note, we were talking about Starbucks a little bit before. Supporters, people have raised $65,000 for a San Diego Starbucks barista after a woman posted a video on Facebook of him refusing her service because she wouldn't wear a mask. In the video, Lennon Gutierrez calmly explains to this woman that the company has a mask policy, that everyone needs to wear a mask. She calls people sheep and says she's going to complain to Starbucks corporate offices. So she put this video on Facebook to try to shame the kid. But of course, it ended up backfiring because people were like, yeah, you're wrong, lady. Put a mask on.
This is actually, I like this story because this kid, Lennon Gutierrez, he says he's going to use all of this money to fund his dream of teaching dance, which is a very nice end to the story. Jill, having been a barista, which is why I wanted to put this in, it is just, I mean, anybody in the service industry who has ever worked in the service industry will say the same thing, but people feel so entitled when they're in like a place of business. And the whole mask thing is really putting a point on that. I think there was the other video going around this weekend of this Trader Joe's in California. I don't know if you saw, it was another white woman who was having a total meltdown because she wasn't wearing a mask. It's like, I don't get why this is so
I was
hard.
trying to figure out, I saw that on social media, that video, and I couldn't figure out where it was. And somebody had a really funny tweet. They're like, it took this ridiculous video for me to realize there was a Trader Joe's in my neighborhood. And I was like, wait, where is it? Where is it? But okay, so that was in California?
California. Both of
Okay.
these were in California. I don't know what's going on in Southern California here. But yeah, I mean, they call these things Karen, the women in these videos Karens, right? Like they're these like entitled white people, I guess. But it's just the mask thing in particular just really bugs me to no end because it's so easy. It is so easy to just wear a mask, people.
Wait, could we discuss also, like, why did Karen, the name Karen, become this name that represents like everything that's wrong with middle-aged white women?
I know, and imagine if your
I
name
have a
is
friend
Karen.
named Karen. I kind of feel bad.
Yeah, I used to know somebody named Alexa, and she was like, yeah, my name was totally ruined by Amazon, but this is actually even worse.
So we were almost not going to name my daughter Alexandra because of Alexa, but we felt like it was different enough.
Yeah, it's different enough.
But we're totally going off on a tangent. But good for, you know what, like, good, I guess, on, Facebook, I guess, has some good uses where people saw that and were just like, we got to raise money for this guy.
Fair point.
Okay, that's what you need to know for Monday, June 29th.
All right, folks, have a great Monday.